Good afternoon, folks. Isn't it lovely being in here where it's nice and dry? Because it is peeing out there. Absolutely torrential rain. Anyway, thank you very much for coming back for the afternoon. We've got some excellent speakers for you, and you will find it worth your while. Our first speaker this afternoon is Esther Stringer, MD, Border Crossing UX. And what Esther wants to talk about is how do you go about engaging with the people that actually count in your business? So, Esther, over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you had a spectacular lunch. Thank you very much for putting on the mushroom vol au vents. Those of you who come to these conferences regularly know they are my favourite. My name is Esther Stringer, and I'm the Managing Director at Border Crossing UX, and we're a user experience specialist consultancy based in Edinburgh and London. And we specialise our clients across the public and private sector, accelerate adoption and growth using our user-centred design approach. And here I'm here to tell you that, unfortunately, people don't care about your transformation. They really just want their shit to work. Our vision at Border Crossing UX is to imagine a better future and create it. And as a result of that, I have worked on numerous multi-stakeholder digital transformation projects in different user research, insights, and experience roles. And because I really actually do want to create a better future for all, I am delighted to be here today amongst all of you, people who truly care about making change happen. And I'm particularly grateful for the opportunity to celebrate you all and your ambitions to fundamentally re-architect your organisation so you can take advantages in the advancements of technology and human behaviour at scale. And I truly believe that that is vital, not just for organisations to survive and thrive, but for society as a whole. And that's especially true after we've witnessed such an innovative phase in human evolution. During COVID, where not only did we manage to digitally transform the way we do things as a society, but we actually also managed to accelerate the governance and the processes that often can inhibit or shape our transformation programs. But I have to say, over the last few years, something has been bugging me, really, really vexing me. And that's how much time we spend talking about digital transformation as opposed to doing it. Because I have to remind you that we are all a very unique group of people who care about digital transformation. Because most people do not care about your digital transformation. They just want their shit to work. And they have a really high expectation of what they should be able to do digitally today and how they should be able to do that. And that's due to all the tech disruptors, what they've seen on TV, and that rapid implementation of tools during COVID. But they also have an incredibly low understanding of how complex and time-consuming enabling what they see as a simple function can actually be. Because people can now do their banking on the toilet, they want to be able to complete all their tasks in such a fashion or such a simple way. And when I'm talking about other people, I mean everyone else apart from the people on your program. All other people from your customers, right the way through to your colleagues. If they are not part of your digital transformation team, they very rarely care. And how do I know this? Well, my job is actually to help people functionally and emotionally connect with brands through great experiences. So I spend a lot of time with different, diverse, internal and external stakeholders, aka other people, in workshops and interviews, and I ask them how might we deliver improved products, services, tools and experiences. And because I work across multiple sectors, I've had a vast array of responses to that question, how might we improve things? Like be able to book appointments online, be able to see a single view of my customer, sell more tickets, buy more tickets, register for a course, renew my insurance. But what's really interesting is whether they're thinking about their personal or their work goals, responses always tend to be task-orientated. And do you know the one thing that no one has ever said to me in my 14 years of doing this job? I want you to run a digital transformation program to change your organization. Never. It just does not happen. It doesn't enter their consciousness to consider a transformation program. And that's partly because, let's be honest, it's 2023, and people assume that everything is digital. But mostly it's because all they really want is for the thing that they need, whether it be a product, a service, or a tool, to work simply and easily when they want it to work. Aha, you may be thinking, this is just a communication issue. We need to ensure that we explain to people why they should care, why it's important to them that we are digitally transforming. I know, let's start a new project in communication and culture, and then let's define a series of campaigns that will help people understand more about digital transformation and how integral it is to their lives. And you know what? That is what I thought. I really thought that because, we all know if they want their things to work, we probably do need to transform our processes, systems, and tools. So therefore, they must care. So over the years, I've run series of user groups, design sprints, and workshops, all as part of digital transformation programs, and I have clearly and very carefully explained what the program is and shown some really fancy plans on a page and explained what the future will be like in 5 to 25 years. And I get two main reactions to when I start talking to people about digital transformation who aren't working on it. It's either apathy, their eyes glaze over and they zone out, or worse, it's anger, and they look palpably cross, often with that vein starting to throb somewhere in their foreheads. So why do we get these two reactions? Well, it's because there are clear misconceptions about digital transformation programs, such as digital transformation sounds really expensive, and there may be little to no return on investment. It sounds really complicated with lots of confusing terms and diagrams. And frankly, it's irrelevant to them. It's a distraction from what they want you to do, which is enable them to complete their tasks how and when they want to. And that's why we either get apathy because it's too far in the future and is disconnected from their goals, or anger that you're wasting their time and money on a massive program rather than fixing their everyday problems. So what do? Because we can't ignore all other people and run our digital transformations as secret cabals of experts. We can't do this in isolation, so we have to ensure to engage with people who we want to adopt our new ways of doing things or utilize the new tools. So what do we do to overcome the apathy and the anger? Well, in my experience, there are 3 simple ways to engage or re-engage with people about your digital transformation. Number 1, stop talking about digital transformation and start talking about the outcomes it will enable for them. Because whilst the process, the governance, and the culture is absolutely vital for the success of a program, not everybody needs to know about it. The only thing that truly matters for all the stakeholders is what they will be able to do and how it will improve their lives and when. So talk to them about their goals, their needs, and when it will happen. And then you can prioritize all of the different user stories and things that you identify based on the effort of implementation against the impact to your organization and your customers. That way you can easily identify what matters most to all stakeholders and roadmap an effective program. Number 2, please stop trying to sound clever and avoid using complex technical words. Use the language of the people you are talking to. Now, if you're talking to colleagues or executives, it may well be appropriate to use various systems, processes, and tools terminology. But if you do, just like Connor did this morning for empathetic architecture, make sure you have a common understanding of what you mean by each term, even if that means creating a glossary of terms. That might sound like a laborious task, but it's the best way to onboard new team members and also create a shared understanding with your current team. It's actually amazing how many meetings I attend where people are talking at cross purposes and simply asking what an acronym or a word definition means can realign them all. And most importantly, when talking to customers, it's imperative you match and mirror their language rather than educate them on terminology. If you use unfamiliar language, even with everyday people using architecture in a non-house related way or talking about data lakes, etc., you're probably going to confuse them further, and that's going to make them feel stupid, and nobody likes to feel stupid. So explain things in simple, and inclusive words that everyone from a 6-year-old to your granny can understand. And finally, number 3, stop telling people what you're going to do and show them. Whenever possible, show people what the future will be like, whether that's through prototypes, videos, simple lo-fi wireframes, or process flows. If you can show some people what it is and explain how it will work within the context of their use, it's so much more powerful than explaining esoteric concepts. This approach will allow you to test your concepts early, get feedback around something that everyone can understand, as opposed to talking around a vision of the future. And even better than that, take on some low-hanging fruit or quick wins. Start your build early and make immediate improvements. If you have spoken to your stakeholders, you have got their needs, I guarantee you there are a few problems or user stories you've identified, you can start now. It may mean a small amount of refactoring later on, but it's actually worth it to show people you can work at pace and you are focused on their outcomes and priorities. That's how you build momentum and naturally engender better buy-in, engagement, and adoption. So I suppose to conclude, this talk should be renamed to people do care about your digital transformation, but they don't know that they do, and they really don't need to know that they do, because you can bring them along that digital transformation journey without them even knowing it. By talking about the outcomes your transformation will enable, rather than its complexity and process. By talking in their language so they don't feel lost or stupid, or worse, not listened to. And by starting to build your concepts and solutions early. So you can show them that you are going to make both your customers and employeeship work both today, but also in the future. Thank you very much for your time.
Esther was saying earlier that that was the PG-rated version of that talk, which is a good thing to have. And as you probably know, I do a lot of these conferences, and that doesn't make me an expert by any manner of means, but I think it does entitle me to an opinion. And that opinion is this, that we don't have enough presentations featuring unicorns on toilets.
Thank you. Thank you.
Just saying, just saying. Right, our next speaker is Neill Smith, Head of Infrastructure for the Scottish Government, utterly appalled at the fact that he's got to follow a unicorn-rich presentation, and his talk is told A Whirlwind Tour of the Scottish Government, People, Culture and Multi-Cloud. Live up to that.
Sounds good. I don't even... I don't know how I'm going to live up to my talk, let alone what we just heard from Esther. That was effing awesome, wasn't it, man? That was right on point. Okay, as I was telling Mark earlier on, this is going to be a whirlwind. This is generally a 50-minute talk that's quite technical, which I've changed, obviously, because it's a digital transformation piece, which Esther smashed out the park, right? Talking about digital transformation. I'm going to try and focus on the people and the culture, but then also the digital transformation in terms of the innovation and creativity that we're actually doing. And I work in one of the largest directorates inside the Scottish Government in terms of cloud and multi-cloud, and how innovation and creativity can actually drive a real culture and actually invest in our people. So the title for the talk today is Building for Flexibility and Control, which is an agnostic approach to multi-cloud. So I'm going to give you a high-level overview of what I deem multi-cloud is and how we went about actually achieving that agnostic nature, but with a focus on that kind of people and culture, and try and make it less kind of technical. Bit about me. Head of Infrastructure for the Rural Economy, Agriculture and Rural Economy Directorate. Like I said, it's one of the largest directorates inside the Scottish Government. At one point, and this is quite embarrassing, in our peak, we had about 400 people in IT, just for the directorate. It's far less now. My background, I've got a bit of a complex background. I'm cleaning it up a little bit there. So software developer, sysadmin, and an infrastructure architect to the head of infrastructure, etc. This is where I'll touch on a lot of the people and the culture. I manage a multidisciplinary team, which varies from, I'm not going to go through the list there, but if we focus on the bottom piece, which is the creativity and innovation, the forward-looking piece. And that's extremely difficult in the government, right? The government always have strict budgets. There's no real budget there's no real stream for innovation and creativity, and you probably have that similarly elsewhere outside the public sector. So it can be a real challenge. And for me, what I try and do is, I'm previously a technical guy, now head of infrastructure, where I find it's my job to cut through that red tape and bureaucracy, shield that from my guys, the team. I always say that the team are the geniuses. These are the people that come up with the great ideas and actually execute them. I'm literally just the mouthpiece that gets the privilege to stand up here. But in terms of that culture piece, is in the government, we're still a bit rigid. We're still a bit bureaucratic, very red taped. Sometimes we heard earlier on today about the micromanagement piece. It's very gradist still. And the government are still slow to change, etc. And I'm fortunate, I'd like to say I've kind of engineered it, but I've got a great deal of autonomy. And in that autonomy, I've managed to build up a team of people, and the majority of them are civil servants. We do use some contractors, etc. But a large majority of them, and they hang around, are super smart people that actually deliver some real cutting-edge technologies. And what I like to do is provide them the creativity and innovation, give them that space to do what they're good at. The key piece in that is I always try and say that they want to take at least a few hours a week to be able to do that. Sometimes it's not always possible, etc. But what it does is I always say a happy person is a productive person. And if they're happy and they're more productive, then everybody kind of wins. And ultimately, working in the government, if the end user's happy, then we've kind of smashed it in the park. Just a brief overview about agricultural economy. Ultimately, we are a software house inside the technical arm. We develop applications for subsidies. I put up there $1 billion. It sounds far sexier than £700 million of subsidies that we pay out. It varies every year, but yeah, it's about $1 billion, etc. Due to Brexit, the way we do our subsidies is changing. We're becoming more greener. And after this talk, I do another talk on culture, but also on certain innovation projects, and we're doing something we're looking right now with satellite photography and AI and ML, etc., and how we can actually provide a service which also measures carbon emissions and how green agriculture is the third biggest carbon emitter inside the UK. So, what is multi-cloud? There's a popular misconception around multi-cloud. I get around a bit. I do a lot of these speaking kind of circuits, and I speak to a lot of CTOs and CIOs, etc. And when I asked them if they were doing multi-cloud, and this is a few years ago, they're like, yeah, man, we're doing multi-cloud. I'm like, oh, awesome. How are you doing it? And generally what they say is they're saying, yeah, well, I've got running workloads in Azure and then workloads in AWS and workloads in GCP, for example. And I'm like, oh, okay. Well, how easy is it to migrate your workload from workload A from AWS to workload B on Azure, etc., or flip them over? And they're like, no, we can't do that. We're using cloud-native services. That's very difficult. We'd have to rework. And I'm like, well, that's not real true multi-cloud, is it? Right? You're just using technologies, etc., and then you don't have the flexibility to actually utilize what true multi-cloud actually is. But what is true multi-cloud? So true multi-cloud for me, and this is totally up for debate, etc., but true multi-cloud is run workloads anywhere at any time, right? And that sounds quite powerful. But for the end user, etc., if you're actually using as the owner of applications, etc., having that ability to move those workloads where you want, when you want, is an extremely powerful thing to have inside your arsenal, etc. So a click of a button, you can flip it from hyperscale A to hyperscaler B on the cloud. But that sounds great. And this leads on to probably challenges that everyone will relate to, certainly in the government relate to, and I use this phrase, cloud is not prescriptive, and I'll say why cloud's not prescriptive is I have a phrase that's coming up in the next slide. In fact, I'll just jump onto it quickly, is you should host your workloads based on your requirements. And what that effectively means is for too long, what we've done, particularly for cloud technologies, is we've picked a hyperscale cloud provider, and then what we've had to do is we've shoehorned all our requirements into that technology, right? And that's the wrong way around, right? Our requirements should always dictate what technology we use. So what you end up finding is I'm all in on one hyperscale cloud provider, and they're basically just shoehorning everything into the technologies of that hyperscale cloud provider. And that's a bad place to be in. I always say, regardless, whatever your requirements are, and up there you've got security, cost, compliance, performance, there's a whole host of other ones. You actually base it on that, and then that dictates where it sits on. So if we just go back to cloud's not prescriptive, I imagine everyone in this room has got a probably cloud first policy, right? Particularly in the government, but I've also seen it in private enterprises, etc. A lot of people interpreted a cloud first policy as run everything to the cloud, right? And that's not what it says. It says look at cloud first, and that goes back to my earlier piece on host workloads based on the requirements. And to pitch this, I'm of a relatively senior grade in the government, but I'm not a senior civil servant, thankfully. But when you're pitching these kind of ideas where they've been sold the dream of the cloud, and I love the cloud, but they've been sold the dream and they think everything should go into the cloud, I had to try and analyse it or come up with an analogy which got their head around it. And this is why I use cloud's not prescriptive as a picture of a doctor up there. Is the scenario I gave to them was, it was a bit like everybody in this room going to the doctor, right? And that doctor prescribing us the same prescription. Well, that's not going to happen, right? We're all unique and we've all got our own ailments. Well, it's the same as your workloads, right? But why do we treat our workloads as pretty much just generic and standard, and we'll just shoehorn them into our technology or our hyperscale cloud provider? So what's the answer? And this is where I'm going to try and not be overly technical on this kind of piece. But the only way to do true multi-cloud is basically containerization and their orchestration, etc. So that goes back to my earlier slide where I said being able to run your workloads where you want, when you want. And the only way to really do that is actually put it in a container, etc. I'm stressing here as well, is host your workloads based on your requirements. This is just an example, okay? It's not the be-all and end-all. If portability is key for you, for certain government organisations and private industries, if a hyperscale cloud provider has a security vulnerability they can't remediate quickly, you're probably going to have to shut down your service until that gets fixed. If they double the cost overnight, you're going to have to suck that up. But having the ability to be able to run your workloads where you want, when you want, is hugely powerful. And the way to do that is put it in a container and orchestrate it, which is mainly Kubernetes. And I'm hoping everybody here has kind of heard of Kubernetes before. And that's the only way you can actually do true multi-cloud. And I'll come on in a couple of slides' time on, this isn't a standard civil servant standing up here saying, I've had this great idea, I've got a white paper, and I've not really proven it. What I've done here is well, I say we, right? My excellent team is, what we've done here is we've taken the agnostic approach to multi-cloud, we've actually proven it and then enterprised it up, etc. And it's all part of that innovation and that culture moving forward. But there's 4 main pillars to do true multi-cloud in this containerized orchestrated piece. Challenge 1 is the data layer. How are you going to manage the data layer? I was actually going to come out with an amusing technical gag, but I'll actually refrain for that one. So challenge 1 is the data layer. If you're going to move your workloads from hypervisor A to hypervisor B, then you're going to have to manage the data layer, etc. And that's quite key. That was one of the core components that we were worried about. The other core component of the 4 pillars that we talk about is networking. How are you going to do multi-cloud networking? And again, in my fuller talk, I go into full length on how we manage to basically network together our on-premise data center, AWS and Azure, and pair them all together and communicate, inside 40 minutes. It's hugely powerful. And plus, it standardizes everything. It means that you don't have to learn the networking technologies of AWS and Azure, etc. We touched on it earlier. Stephen touched on it earlier about kind of security in his morning chat kind of piece. Security compliance is key, right? It's difficult enough to manage one cloud provider. I can imagine a question people thinking, man, it's difficult enough to get the resources and to manage one hyperscale cloud provider. How are you managing to do that on multi-clouds, right? And that is a challenge. But there are tools out there that can actually manage multiple clouds and do security compliance, etc. And the final key pillar in this multi-cloud challenge is monitoring observability, right? That's key. So to recap, data, networking, security compliance, and monitoring observability. And I'm not going to disclose the technologies, etc., that we use, but I'll happily tell you offline if anybody's interested on the tools that we use to actually execute that. So I'll give you a brief overview of what we actually done. Again, it's super simplified. Up here, we have down the long piece at the bottom, we have An on-premise in a government data center running in OpenShift, it's just a Kubernetes piece. And we managed to take an example workload. It was a live, valid workload. It wasn't made up, etc. And we migrated it into OpenShift on AWS, and that took 1.5 minutes and a click of a button. And then we migrated it into Azure on OpenShift, and that took 1.5 minutes, and then we moved it back down to on-prem on our data center. That's quite powerful, right? But I'm pretty greedy, and I'm like, well, how can we push that further, etc. So what we actually managed to do was we made it agnostic. So that on-premise data center inside the Scottish Government running on OpenShift, we managed to migrate that workload into EKS on AWS, and then AKS on Azure and back down again. And that took minutes as well, right? So that becomes hugely powerful. And I speak at it from a taxpayer point of view as well, as we run a lot of our workloads in containers and orchestrated inside OpenShift. My current deal with Red Hat own OpenShift, etc. When they realise that I've got most of my workloads contained inside one of their platforms, come renewal time, they're probably going to think they're holding me to hostage, and they can say they can charge whatever they want. In this example, I can actually say, well, actually, no, that doesn't matter to me. Within a click of a button, actually, I can migrate my workloads to any hyperscale cloud provider on any Kubernetes platform, etc. And that becomes hugely powerful. And that goes back to that people and culture. This was a relatively less than 2 weeks, and not full time, where certain individuals in the team went away and experimented and played and engaged with vendors, etc. And it's a bit like what Esther mentioned just in her talk there, and what I'm keen on doing is that prototype piece. Show what you can get. Been described as a bit of a kind of positive and a negative, a kind of maverick in the government. I live in those grey kind of areas, etc. And generally when I hear there's a business requirement, I'll go away and try and build a prototype and work with the vendors, get them to pay for it, right? It's public money, and say, hey, I've got a great idea. They agree, and then I say, well, can you help us do this, etc., using your technologies? And then when you show the business love it, and then the normal challenges inside the government, which is generally red tape, bureaucratic, they get told, no, we can't do that because we don't have time and we don't have enough money. When you've actually got something tangible to show, and the business already love it, it kind of breaks down those barriers, and then you can really begin to enterprise it up. And that's the kind of way I move forward in terms of that people and process. And the guys absolutely love it in the team, and we go through numerous kind of proof of concepts and proof of values, and we're working on one right now on satellite photography and AI and ML, which could be a real game changer, and it's really cool, etc. The final point, orchestration and automation. So having the ability to move the workloads where you want, when you want in any hyperscale cloud provider and on any Kubernetes platform, but you want to be able to orchestrate and automate that, and we managed to do that as well. So we've got that complete end-to-end solution, which gives us that control and flexibility. I'll just quickly end. This is not ESG. I know what everyone thinks ESG is. This is slightly different. It's the enterprise strategy group. Basically, they asked 400 North American large enterprise businesses about what their priorities are, etc. And I'll zoom in just there. And you see that the vast majority of respondents indicate the application portability is either critical or very important, etc. And if you have a look at the bottom bit where it says that 30%, our cloud-native applications will be deployed in a combination of public cloud platforms, including edge locations and private data centers. So this is just from last year. These are 4 large North American organizations. So you can see that multi-cloud is a key kind of component here as we move forward in technology, and Kubernetes has really blown up. Container technology is not new, right? It's been around since the 70s. The orchestration is kind of what's brought into its own piece. Sitting on here, you can have a look at a lot of the challenges that they point out. It was security and monitoring observability. The one thing I want to ask you to look at is right at the very bottom there, is basically the biggest challenges with cloud-native applications. And 2% of those 400 basically said we don't have any challenges, right? That's absolutely incredible. Who the hell says that, right? I'm pretty sure we all have bloody well challenges in the cloud, because cloud isn't easy, right? I talked about it earlier. Cloud's a beast. It's difficult getting people in and retaining, and it's the same as Kubernetes. So that's a very whistle-stop tour on the innovation and creativity and trying to cut through that red tape and bureaucracy in the government to be quite innovative. And it's quite unusual for a government, right? The government's traditionally pigeoned themselves at the bottom of the curve, and I like to be up at the top of the curve, because actually if we're doing cool stuff, we can attract more people. People are happy, they become more productive. It makes me look great, right? And it's all those guys doing all the hard yards. And I'll quickly touch, that's honestly true. And I'll quickly touch on sustainable computing. This is another talk that I do, which is coming more and more to the forefront, etc. The government's very keen, the Scottish Government are very much on the front foot. So there's a very much a green agenda, and I mentioned that agriculture is the third biggest carbon emitter inside the UK, etc. But from a technology standpoint, where does that fit in with us? And a lot of people don't see, if we're putting things in the cloud, for those that are unaware on how we measure carbon, etc., there's 3 scopes, etc. People only focus on scope 1 and 2. I won't go into detail where they are. Scope 3 is the indirect emissions. So a lot of people will lift and shift their data center from on-premise and run it in the cloud and think, well, that's AWS's responsibility or Azure's responsibility. And that's not. That's your responsibility as well. That's scope 3, your indirect kind of piece. So how can we improve in that? And that's what we're looking in the government right now, is about sustainable computing. And I know Connor mentioned that his piece earlier on today. And it's about like data design and usage, software application design, data storage. You know, where's that data getting held? The government notoriously have a large amount of data. Sometimes it's duplicated. You know, that's taken up storage, and that's power, etc. Code efficiency, your CPU cycles, etc. Making your applications efficient and not as chatty or as latent, etc., makes a big difference. And that's going to be the new big thing in terms of moving forward on sustainable computing, but actually from a technology software kind of standpoint. And we can no longer offload that to say that's a hyperscale cloud or piece. So in summary, that's me. I'm not going to repeat. Anyone that has heard of Simon Sinek, I absolutely love him. The man's an absolute legend. I generally try and rip off most of his key kind of phrases, etc. And that's a brilliant one there. What good is an idea if it remains an idea? Try, experiment, fail, try again, change the world, right? And it's what Nana mentioned earlier as well, is that kind of fail fast. The only way you learn is by failing. And by the only way by failing is you've got to be innovative, and it's okay to get it wrong. It's okay to be wrong. I love making decisions. Sometimes in the government it can be a bit restrictive. People don't want to make decisions. It can be a political reason. I love making a decision, and if it's wrong, I'm happy to put my hand up and say I got it wrong. I made the right decision at the time, but I got it wrong. But you know what? I've learned loads, and the next solution that comes along will learn from that kind of piece. But yeah, I'm all about the kind of creativity and innovation and trying to drive that change through in the government. And that's a piece of the kind of transformation piece that we've been looking at to bring multi-cloud or true multi-cloud into the government. That's me.
Right, thank you very much for that, Neill. We've got a tag team now. I'm not sure entirely certain how they're going to operate it, but I'll leave it up to them. James Mullins is Head of Data and Insights for Scottish Rugby. Charlie Simpson is Head of Business Development for Scottish Rugby. And it's about how Scottish Rugby use data for just about everything. So, James, after you. Oh, yeah. And Charlie. Give them a round of applause.
Good afternoon, and I was sort of hoping that I'd be able to enter from behind or somewhere else instead of being called out in a sort of walk of shame to get up here. So I apologise for being a touch late. I got held up from a meeting in Glasgow, but it's wonderful to be here. And we're going to have about 15 minutes to just try and talk you through where Scottish Rugby is from a commercial point of view and from a data and digital point of view, and the journey that we're going on and what we hope to do. It's a fascinating position that we find ourselves in. Sport's a wonderful emotive product. It's a wonderful industry, and we're very, very blessed to work in it. But sport can be very archaic in how we deal with business problems, in how we make money, and how we deliver value to fans. And over the past, we've often looked to broadcast deals and short-term sponsorship and ticket sales to be the true value driver in what we're doing and where we're going. But that's changing, and it's changing because of consumer appetite, but also B2B business and what we need to do. Where we see the value in the future, being a product, being an industry, being a governing body, is being able to get to know our fans, our customers, our players on a very one-to-one basis. It requires a huge amount of work, and we're only at the beginning of it. But the talk today that James and I are going to run you through broadly will refer to where we are and what we hope to do. Just getting into like a concept that we speak to a lot whenever we regard or whenever we think about data and digital and how we leverage any data we have. There's 10,080 minutes in a week. And it seems like perhaps a slightly silly concept whenever you take it. But in the past, and what I referred to begin with, was the fact that for the history of rugby, and actually the history of a lot of sport, the focus has entirely been on the 80 minutes. How can we maximize what we've got? How can we maximize any revenue and fan experience from the 80 minutes in football, or the 80 minutes in rugby, the 90 minutes in football, and what does that mean for our business and how we can move it forward? But really, the way that we're doing it now is we're flipping it, and we're figuring out if we say the 80 minutes is what we've got, how we operate with our fans and how we create value as something that we're good at and we know, how can we create a huge amount of value in the 10,000 minutes that remain out with the match day. It's a big challenge. It's one that sometimes can be quite difficult to communicate up the chain and to deliver value across the different streams we have at Scottish Rugby, from being a governing body and a professional team. But it's something that we think is really, really exciting. And over the next sort of 10 minutes, we're going to explain how we're doing that. One, from a performance point of view, which James will go into a bit more depth on. Secondly, creating like a brilliant fan experience, because at the end of the day, we're a product, we're competing for attention across entertainment, music, and everything else. And lastly, and importantly, the commercial impact and what it means, because the whole need, in our view, and anything we're doing from a data and from a tech point of view, is making sure that we enable people to love Scottish rugby and to be able to grow our product as much as possible to create a sustainable future for Scottish rugby.
Yeah, thanks, Charlie. So essentially looking at the sort of digital transformation buzzword of a project that we're working our way through, we're very much in our foundational phase at the moment. We're taking a look at our foundational venue and digital technology infrastructure and essentially assessing, is that going to fulfill what we're attempting to achieve? So we've got a very clear why and where we want to get to, and fundamentally we're going, what do we need to build that upon moving forward? So this is the sort of structure that we're working through, is this venue technology. So we've been working on things like building core physical network, edge network, server infrastructure, whether we're looking into cloud providers, what systems we're utilizing. And then essentially now what we're trying to do is bump up to this next level, which is how are we actually maximizing the impact of that within both the performance side of the business, but also the commercial side. And then ultimately it comes across to how are we set up as a people structure. There's been talks earlier today about skill shortages in the industry, and how are we actually maximizing our ability, where we're probably quite well set in the performance side, but less so across the rest of the business in terms of digital and data technical skill set. So, and then obviously the top end as to where we actually want to get to is this kind of layer where we've improved customer experience, we've generated potentially incremental revenues or sorted out cost efficiencies, and certainly operational efficiency. So in terms of our sort of data process and the way that we're actually viewing the way that we work with data, the analogy I tend to work with is if you want to make a homemade pizza and you want to do something from scratch, yeah, you go to the shop, you buy the ingredients, and if you go to the shop and buy the wrong ingredients, you're not going to make a pizza. You might make something quite tasty, but it's not going to be a pizza. So the other scenario that we tend to find, particularly in the sports industry and potentially elsewhere, is what we tend to go out and buy is a pre-made pizza base, which looks like a pizza. We chuck our toppings on the top, but it's just not the real thing. And I think we're all quite guilty of that fundamentally in industry, that we go and buy a product that is supposedly one size fits all and serves our purposes. And then fundamentally at the back end of that, we need to be in a position where we can actually present that and then consume it. And as a business, that's how we're looking at our data process, is getting the right inputs in. The phrase always goes around about garbage in, garbage out. So we're sorting out that front end, the back end of the data, the front end of what we're capturing, and then ultimately looking at how are we going to use that to fulfill experiences, and ultimately what insights can we pull from that to improve our products and our offerings. So going into the 80 minutes, and Charlie alluded to, there's a massive focus on how do we actually improve performance on the field. I work closely with our high performance teams and our recruitment, and for those of you that aren't aware, our structure is fundamentally we've got men's and women's national teams who are obviously professional. National team players will then be a part of our pro teams that we own fully, and there's also then players playing in other leagues around the world. And ultimately for us, we need to identify the best quality Scottish qualified talent from home through our pathway systems, players that are born in other territories as well, and develop the most competitive national team that we can. That's looking after the on-field product, because fundamentally that powers the rest of this system that we have going right the way down to the community game. Now, the way that we viewed doing that is using data to help us identify that talent, And ultimately, the way that we're doing that is through acquiring third-party data sets and then applying our own data modeling to actually identify players of high potential. And we've been doing this for the last 2 or 3 years now, with some examples that I'll give you going through into the national team. So fundamentally, the data set that we now purchase and the one that we've been creating is 9 seasons of global international rugby. We have 51 global competitions across the men's and the women's games. The women's game is in particular growing at the minute with the English Domestic League and obviously the national sides turning pro over the last year or so. And that equates to over 9,500 games being played in the professional game, 14,500 players, and over 17 million rows of data. So now to give you a perspective on that, I was doing a piece of work the other week where there is out of contract 600 and odd players in the global game at the minute, players who are available who could come in. Now, they won't all be Scottish qualified, so they might not be the right options for us. But we were assessing every single player, and I worked out that it was 2.28 million minutes of rugby that these players have collectively played together. So if I was to go and set a task of our guys to go and watch every minute of those players to know what they have done, what their contribution has been, if that was one person for 12 hours a day, every day of the year, it would take them 8.1 years to ascertain whether that player was a player of talent. Now, ultimately, you might say they'd watch 5 minutes and they go, yeah, they're pretty good or they're not. But fundamentally, if we're going to be thorough, we want to know where has a player come from, what trajectory are they on. Quite often, there's a guilt within the sport that we buy players based on who they were and the reputation that they've had, not the player that you're actually buying and getting right now. So when we're looking at players internally, we need to be able to model and go, we've got these superstars in the national team, the likes of Finn Russell, who are potentially the best players in the world in their position. How are we finding the next Finn Russell, either internally or externally, and how are we developing that? And ultimately, that comes down to us making the right choices and the right investments as to who to back, who to give the game time to, who needs recontracting, who gets external experiences, who goes overseas, and so on and so forth. So the way that we're doing that is fundamentally we've got player modeling, so we can assess every single player in that system. It takes 30 seconds for our model to now run. And essentially the core basis of that model is based on, in any given situation, a player's action is either going to neutrally, positively, or negatively impact the probability of scoring or concession. And that goes down to a contextual variable based on where on the pitch are we in that moment in time, what is the game situation, are we behind on the scoreboard, are we ahead, is it an advantage state if we've got a man off the field, and fundamentally it's looking at what has been the likely impact on following sets of actions, and assessing it overall, what has the player's contribution been, okay? Because that's all we can control, is we can put the best collective set of contribution to fulfill ultimately what we believe would be a winning formula on the field. And to give you context, a few guys that we've brought in recent years who have done that, so at the pro clubs level, guys like Emiliano Buffelli, who you may well have seen playing for Argentina at the World Cup. We brought him in a couple of years ago for a pro team benefit. That's obviously not a national team benefit. But the reason why we do that is we pick players who are going to raise standards within the environment. So essentially the skill sets and the opportunities that they produce rub off on other players. There's then players of high SQ talent, so guys like Sione Tuipulotu and Jack Dempsey directly in our national team, who are players who are eligible to play for Scotland the day they were born. We're ostracised for the fact that they're Australian in the way that they've been brought up, but fundamentally they are high quality players, and both of them are now potentially in the top couple of players in the world in their position, who Australia did not rate at the time, okay? Moving into the other side, fundamentally what we're doing is trying to produce resources from that. I've talked about the recruitment piece, but actually it's how are we utilising this to support our pro teams and our national team in terms of preparation for their upcoming games, tactically, and little stories. We had a game a couple of years ago when Eddie Jones was still in charge of England, and we noticed that England only ever kick with the grain of play. And what that means is if the breakdown is over there and they receive the pass from here, they kick across the field. And that was the pattern that we produced. So when we're marking a backfield, ordinarily you distribute 3 players in your backfield and they cover an equal amount of space. Well, we actually left the short side completely open. And if you actually watch that game, Stuart Hogg, who was playing on that day, was marking midfield. We had a second player on there, and then we had a short kick option covering the chip over. So England, if they played heads at rugby, would have taken us to the cleaners that day. However, because they were stuck in their system, they played their way, and fundamentally it's part of their problem still even now. Through these resources, not me, but the national team guys were able to identify those trends and have a performance impact on the field. Okay? Going back into the 10,000.
And what James was sort of speaking to is really, really key, because winning's essential, but whenever you work in Scottish rugby, you don't always win. So we need to try and make sure that we can win as much as possible off the field and outside the 80. And that's where we've got to. And James is obviously a lot more technical than I am, and I approach this from a strategy point of view and more of a commercial point of view. But what we're trying to do is just build this virtuous cycle of fandom, engaged audience, and improving the commercials, and making that become a real engine for Scottish rugby. We need to get to a place where we treat our fans really well, we know who they are, we know what they want, we grow that into an engaged audience, and we create commercial impact. Our audience at the moment is broadly to do, our global audience is largely through social media and through TV broadcast. So that creates a little bit of a problem for us in that we don't really know our fans. That's been our fault. We've done that in the past because it was quick and easy money. Selling broadcast deals, long-term broadcast deals, that made sure that we could get to the most amount of eyeballs. But it meant that we've done that, and we haven't treated our fans probably in the manner that we should have, or built the back ends that we needed to be able to get to know them. Really good example, which you might have read in the papers over the past year, was the Spotify deal with Barcelona. Spotify came in and Barcelona spoke about the 400 million fans they had. But actually, whenever they dug into Barcelona's database, it was less than 3 million first-party records they had. So it becomes really difficult to communicate with fans and, importantly, monetize them off the back end. And if we want to be the best in the world, if we want to try and win as much as possible outside that 80, we need to be more dynamic and agile in terms of beginning to get to know the fans and growing our audience. There's lots of little things that we can do to kick it off. So what we need to do to improve the fan experience is largely get to know the fan. The first part we did to that was digital ticketing. So if anybody's been to Murrayfield over the past year, the introduction of digital ticketing, we believe, has been successful. Successful because it's made the operational efficiencies, it's improved the experience, and people now, most people have a smartphone, and most people are used to, having digital tickets. But off the back of that, it allowed us to redo our privacy policy and be able to set a strategy for the next number of years whereby we can gather our fans' information for the purposes of getting to know them and beginning to build up, which James will touch on in a minute, really that single customer view that we can begin to add value in the back end. James spoke to earlier, and one of the pieces that we have done is make sure that technology infrastructure at Murrayfield's important. Murrayfield's an aging stadium. It's not the Tottenham Hotspur type stadium. It's not where we need to be, but we need to make sure that we've got at least the infrastructure that we can to be able to interact with fans. Simple things like contactless payments in the stadium, making sure that we can provide the experiences that everybody wants to have improves the fan experience, although it's not overly sexy. Content production, and something we'll show you in a minute, is largely a really easy way to affect fan experience at the moment and begin to engage with fans. Although we might look to do that through our own channels in the future, the means of doing that at the moment are largely through social media type channels. And then also working with third-party providers. So one of the things that we strategically did over the past year was work with Netflix. So Netflix documentary in the Six Nations, as it has been with other sports, is coming out just before next year's Six Nations. We think that that will hopefully have a big driver in terms of the fan experience and letting people know. So where we're at is broadly, from a very, not an overly technical basis, is beginning to nudge towards where we need to be able to engage fans. This should work whenever we get through it, and it's just a really good example of where we can get to and what we need to do to be able to engage fans. So Doohan, which you might remember scoring against England, which fantastic sort of memory in Scottish rugby's minds. But these types of content allow us to communicate with fans in an authentic manner and begin to engage them.
Superman's coming through. Doohan van der Merwe with a finish from the heavens. Unbelievable finish by the Edinburgh man. And this stadium is in shock.
I was just at a sponsorship pitch earlier as well, and I keep wheeling that one out. It's quite good. Only whenever you're speaking to Scottish businesses, though. So we're trying to sort of build up from the start, be very aware of where we need to get to, but also consciously doing it in a manner that allows us to build a really flexible, robust back end to be able to interact with fans is how different technologies and different wants and needs might appear over the coming years. It gets us back to the sort of 10,080 minutes concept of being able to monetize, leverage our data, and make sure that we can have a commercial impact off the back of it. The way we kind of look at it, and as James referred to, is at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is grow our business, grow the capital value in it, grow the brand of Scottish rugby, and make sure that over the coming years, we can be in a position to make Scottish rugby and sport in Scotland even more impressive than it already is, but also making sure that it's sustainable on a real sustainable base.
Yeah, so ultimately, we alluded within the model around prospective fan, engaged audience, and then the commercial impact side of things, that fundamentally we've got that virtuous circle as a business where we're not just responsible for the professional game, the top level, but we're also responsible for the grassroots game, getting people engaged within that. So fundamentally what we've got as our existing sort of digital experience is quite fragmented, using the phrase that was used earlier. And ultimately, we have some good examples of systems that are at the front end, but ultimately it's not a single unified experience. And fundamentally, when we're looking at things like that Netflix documentary, if we look at what potentially happened within sort of the Formula One side of things and the massive increase in interest that generated, we need to find ways of funneling people into our system, engaging them and rewarding them and retaining them. And ultimately the reason for that is our events are so far and few between. The reality is that if you came to a game at Murrayfield this summer, the next time you're probably going to be able to actually get hold of a ticket is going to be next November if you come back to a Scotland men's match, because the Six Nations is so competitive to get. So what are you going to do in that intervening year? You might have had a great day. How do we even get you back? And the challenge for us is making sure that you stay as part of our ecosystem. It might be 2 or 3 years before you can decide to come back. You might not even be a Scotland fan, you might be a New Zealand fan that lives in Scotland, and so on and so forth. So what we're trying to create is essentially a digital estate which is based around, that's implementing single sign-on, having a single version of our customer, but that's across all different levels of our business. So at the minute we have player records down the way to under 12s across the country. Obviously that's managed by Parent Records. We've then got ticketing databases, we've got the ticketing app, and so on and so forth, and merchandise. So what we're trying to do is essentially build that upon a layer of a headless content management system within a new website, and going beyond what is at present essentially a notice board of a website and a wayfinder. So we need to have a single hub of all of our content creation. We need to be implementing things like gamification and engaging with parties around fantasy game and all this side of things. And then fundamentally managing things like your merchandise and everything else, whether that be coach official, that side of things. For those of you who aren't aware, the community game database, that's an in-house product that we've developed, Scrums, which is quite cleverly named as its Scottish Club Rugby Union Management System. And then fundamentally how we're integrating ticketing, tours and hospitality. So what we should be doing is essentially giving you an experience where you sign in and fundamentally you're being served the content that you want based on the personas of previous individuals, based on your previous behaviors and what's hot right now. Where at the minute, you need to do all the work and we're just hoping you come. So we've got to make sure that we get you into that system, we retain you and we reward you. 58% of people who came to our games this summer had never been to a game before. So we need to keep those people in our system, whether that be playing, purchasing, whatever it is, as part of our lifetime cycle. So from us, that's really everything we wanted to talk about. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, James and Charlie. I now understand why I've never received the call to play for my country. Because the system has been judging me on my past performance, which admittedly was pretty crap, but never mind. It ignored the possibility that I might have suddenly made the stratospheric leap to average. Any questions? Now, you can either do this through Slido or stick your hand up. We've got live microphones in the hall. We can get them to you. But if it's a live mic, identify yourself and tell me who you're from at the same time. Let's start off with the hands first. Has anybody got a question from the hall? You very nearly got a microphone there, sir, because you put your phone up. Right. Any at all? Okay. Let's run through some. Oh, there was one in the back? Yeah. Sorry, I never saw you. Too far away. Right.
Cheers. Alistair McKenzie from Gig Day. So this is for the two rugby lads at the end. Obviously, Scotland has a much smaller playing pool than the other home nations. So we are obviously doing this at a rate of knots where other countries maybe aren't. Is that correct?
Either.
Yeah. You're picking up. Yeah, look, ultimately, there are other unions going on similar projects. The RFU are going through a very similar process at the minute, but you're right in the sense that our core sort of playing base is significantly smaller. For us, that is a challenge as to how we grow that, and it's if we were to speak with our rugby development department, it's looking at how are we keeping kids playing in schools, not just going into clubs, and there's a lot of investment fundamentally going into that. So, when we talk about that virtuous circle, ultimately the objective of the top, going back to the phrase in the deck, was it's about inspiration and aspiration and actually funneling people into the game, and the revenues generated at the top are what create the investment at the bottom of the game. That's paying for the community coaches and everything else. So yes, it's a challenge, but we're not the only ones going through that at the moment.
Did I pick you up right? You said last year 58% of the people who came to the game hadn't been to the game before.
So that was this summer. This summer. So the games that we hosted before the World Cup. Obviously, it's a very, very, very different fan base to what we would ordinarily have at Six Nations. Possibly just because things like the weather and everything else, different time of year, kids are on holiday, all that sort of stuff. But yeah, 58% of people had never bought a ticket before. And
if they wanted, they'd watched a match then, and if they wanted to see another match, the chances are it's going to be next November before they can actually see.
In terms of, because the reality is ultimately with Six Nations tickets, they are very, very competitive to get a hold of. That doesn't mean there's no chance, but it's ultimately a difficult thing to get a hold of, an England ticket or something. So, the challenge for us is how do we actually funnel those people into, we've got Edinburgh and Glasgow Warriors both playing every single week or every other week within Scotland, and they're all the Scotland stars that are playing in those teams in a very, very competitive competition. So, that's if we want to get people into the game, we somehow need to be converting people from just national fans into club fans and club fans into national fans. And historically, they've actually been quite segregated groups to some extent, that there isn't actually a lot of crossover. So that's definitely a challenge for us.
Being realistic about this, Charlie, it might actually be quicker rather than queuing for a ticket to retrain as an Edinburgh lawyer, because they've always got tickets for the rugby badges.
Exactly. You've called us out.
Anyway, that top question. Esther, how do you deal with other people in the office not being keen on educating themselves for the last decades to gain at least rudimental IT skills?
Firstly, lovely use of the emoticon. Thank you very much. So the thing is, the question I want to ask you is, why do you need to get other people to educate themselves in the office if they don't need to have those rudimentary IT skills? Do you need to do it? Is it a waste of your time and their time? If you do need to do it, then I would recommend you take the approach that you would with your child or your parents. Show them how to do it, show them why it matters to them. I remember with my mum, internet shopping started. Why don't you just buy your stuff from Sainsbury's online instead of sending my dad once a week to the shop with a massive list? Didn't like it, showed it to her. Oh my God, that's amazing. Now she gets a Waitrose delivery every week and is friends with all the people. So I think it's about showing them the benefit of the effort for them to learn something new. No one likes change. You get two types of people who love learning, people who don't. But I guess before trying to make someone learn something, ask yourself, why am I trying to do that? And do I need to? Or actually, are they quite happy where they are? And this is all a waste of everyone's time.
My first reaction on reading that question was, how many people, stick your hand up if you drive. You drive a car, right? Okay. How many people understand fully the workings of the internal combustion engine? Yeah. That's the comparison. As you rightly say in the title of your talk, people just want stuff to work.
Yep.
It's as simple as that. They probably don't need to know that.
No, exactly. And just share tips. I mean, the other day, Rebecca showed me how to do something I've been doing for years laboriously in Excel with a simple click. It was amazing. So, it's little bits here and there when it's useful.
Indeed. Right. Neill, top question there. Thinking about taxpayers' pounds, how do you ensure value for money from multi-cloud when it's likely to limit buying power and increase the number of suppliers to manage? I would add on to that, if you wouldn't mind discussing it too, would you be able to do what you've done on multi-cloud if you weren't the Scottish Government, if you were a business?
I'll take your question first there, Mark. It's definitely, it's not just a government thing. Anybody can do it. But in terms of value for money, right, that's always a challenge, etc. I understand where the questions come from. The government are notoriously bad at managing projects, technology projects, etc. And there's been some there's been some high-profile cases where things have went badly along in the government, and it's cost a lot of money. I won't disclose; it's public knowledge. But if you care to have a look up how much core government, UK government departments pay in AWS, it's eye-watering. A lot of people over the years have rushed into the cloud. They've basically created a data center in the cloud, and now they're paying tens of millions of pounds to the hyperscale cloud providers, etc. But for the question is, how do you enable VFM? It goes back to my host your workloads based on the requirements. And you're going to have a key core requirement, but one of the slides I put up was about, is your requirement portability or security or cost, etc. And that should drive where it actually sits. But similarly, I don't know if I mentioned it in my talk, is having the ability to have multi-cloud. It gives you the ability to, it was only last year, Microsoft put all their prices up 15% for everything in one big shop, etc. That could make or break companies or government departments, etc. Having the ability to move those workloads around and go, well, I can't afford to run it there anymore. I can now switch that over to a more competitive.
Did they bring their prices back down? No. That was just a standard. It was about this time last year. It was about 15%, straight across the board for everything. I'll put this to all the panelists. How do vendors, cloud providers, actually subvert your perfectly reasonable desire not to be held hostage? Because there's got to be a way. There's got to be a way where they can actually turn this around and face you off and say, no, actually, you're going to have to pay this. I'll go. It depends on the relationship. The horror stories are out there where a simple developer, I'll use AWS as an example, a simple developer can make a small change which costs an astronomical amount of money. And if you're not properly for value for money and FinOps and etc., all that. There's one example where a developer made a change, they didn't recognize it until a week later, it ended up being £30,000 extra they were getting charged, and it took them a further month to work out what the change and what happened. Now, the way the cloud's structured, you pay for what you use, right? So ultimately, these hyperscale cloud providers, you're due to pay it. But it can be down to a relationship thing. If it's your first kind of fault, etc., sometimes they can be. But what was the stat I read? And this is crazy. This shows you the amount of money that hyperscale cloud providers make. There's huge benefits in it, but there's huge negatives on getting it wrong. The large people have done it wrong. When you have a look at the Amazon business, so you know the Amazon where you buy things, etc. I'm going to get the figures roughly about right. It's there or thereabouts. I think it costs, they do like a 90 billion turnover every year. And the cost to run the service is 88 billion. They make £2 billion profit. The AWS business of Amazon has a $4 billion turnover, and it costs them $1 billion to run. They make more money on cloud than they do on the Amazon piece that takes 90 billion to run. That shows you that, hey, there's a lot of people doing cloud wrong, and there's a reason why they're keen to get you in and they're keen to lock you in, etc. And I'm keen to make sure that, hey, cloud's awesome, man, but if you do it wrong, you can be seriously trapped. But I think that indicates the crazy amount of money that can be made for, well, 4 billion is a lot of outlay, right? But compared to 90 billion, you make more profit on it. It's quite staggering. That is terrifying. Second question down there, James and Charlie. Does algorithmic scrutiny of players at a micro contribution level risk underrepresent? This is what happened to me. Level risk underrepresenting wider team contribution areas like leadership, morale, etc.
It depends on how ultimately the business is set up in terms of its recruitment processes. So in our example, it's not just a singular stream. For all that we're actively identifying players and sitting on recruitment panels and recommending options, and generally we tend to sign those options. Ultimately, it is a multidisciplinary team. You know, we are having medical intervention around players' injury histories. We are having video analysts from the national team and the pro teams watching the footage on the players. We do have the coaches' input. The thing I would say is, generally speaking, the players who tend to have the best leadership qualities are actually those that lead by example. And normally what we refer to that is, it's not necessarily that their output is higher than any other given player. However, it means in the big moments in a big game, they come out with the big performance. And actually, fundamentally, the way that the models that we've built are structured is that they are rewarded significantly for performing well in those moments. So generally speaking, the big leaders do tend to come out well within those.
Do you see those moments as being peak points of opportunity? I'll tell you a wee story. My nephew, Joshua, plays the pipes. And a couple of years ago, he was playing outside Murrayfield, and the fans were trooping in, and Scotland were going to play Italy. We were going to get humped, as usual. And, you know, he picked up about 30 quid or something like that, playing his pipes outside. Incredibly, the reverse happened, and Scotland beat Italy. Right? On the way out, he played Scotland the Brave and made 340 quid. Now, I use that as an example because there must be that effect online. It gives you commercial opportunities to actually seize the moment and think, now's the time we can get more people interested in it.
It definitely happens. I gave the example, I was talking with somebody earlier today, and you know, when we look at things like ticket sales, there was quite a notable point when last autumn Finn Russell wasn't picked, so he's one of our star players. He wasn't picked in the autumn squad, and you know, national team coaches will have had their reasons for doing so. And ticket sales basically didn't rise by the rate we normally expect as you get near the games. Well, sure enough, one injury, he was in the squad, boom, tickets go through the roof. As soon as we then played New Zealand, and for all that we didn't beat them, we gave them a very, very good game, the impact on the following week's sales were through the roof. And it's just down to that influence that a player can have. So yeah, like you say, it's those stories and those one-off moments that sport creates that ultimately, to an extent, we have to rely on, but we need to create those at a regular interval and make sure people are engaging with that.
Yeah, okay. Anything from the floor at all? Just double check. I can carry on going through slides, it's not a problem. There was a question there which I seem to have lost. Yes, here we go. Right now, this is a general discussion. I'll take it to you first, Esther, if you don't mind. Right now, cloud is an anti-pattern for sustainability. As with inherited elasticity, any performance issues can be solved just with scaling up more compute. Any thoughts on that?
Absolutely. The whole point of digital transformation for me is it's an opportunity to refactor some of the mistakes we've made previously. And if we're not looking at the sustainability of all of our decisions, from technology right the way through to the content we're sharing, then I think we're missing an opportunity. We've just, not digital transformation, but we just redid our website. And one of the key metrics for us was reducing our carbon. So we've actually got a carbon monitoring thing at the bottom that shows us per page what it is. If the content's too heavy, we'll do that. I think the way to overcome it, and it's something that it's not my idea, I think I've stolen it from DEFRA, is re-looking at how we measure success. So should we actually be measuring success on carbon usage per user, per interaction, as opposed to staying power, people spending longer on site, utilising more tools? So we need to really use this opportunity to not just think about the tools that we use, but the impact that they have on people and the world that we live in.
Neill, thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with Esther. As I picked up on in my last slide about sustainability, and that's going to be key for all of us as we develop applications wherever they're going to actually sit, etc. I think you'll be hard pushed to run your own physical data centre as sustainable as these hyperscale cloud providers. They've got huge stats out there, they're hugely efficient, they're really aggressive on their kind of green agenda, which is great. And I think what we have to then also do from our point of view is, if we're going to use them as a platform to host our applications, we're also going to have to be sustainable, etc. And what I kind of pictured off on that last slide there, people have never given that any consideration, and it's going to have to come into everyone's thought at the earliest design stage, as Esther just picked up on.
Are you looking forward to that? Because I'm not referencing the Scottish Government particularly, but any politician, once they get an idea in their head, it's difficult to dissuade them. So, once they click onto this idea that actually this has got to be sustainable in terms of a carbon footprint, that's going to make your life very interesting.
It's going to be extremely, extremely challenging, and there's pros and cons in that, Mark, is sometimes in the political game, ministers don't want to make any changes. If you make a change, it might cost money. you know, traditionally government maybe don't do these kind of projects very well. It can then look bad on them, which can then affect the re-election. And sometimes you get a bit of a keep the lights on and it stagnates kind of piece, and it's that political game and that 4-year cycle. And it's trying to educate them that actually we can do this and make a big success. And as mentioned in there with the prototype that we're working with AWS and a company called Planet Labs for satellite photography, is they've now got carbon emission satellites. So we're now pushing out that we're going to ask the farmers to tell us how much their carbon emissions are going to be in soil emissions. Well, actually, we can actually find that out for ourselves and give that information back to them and actually use information for the greater good for the people out there in the farming community. Rather than asking them to give it to us, we can give it to them and they can utilise that and say, by the way, do you realise that part over there is actually polluting 50% of your farm, and actually by reducing that you can then get X amount more subsidy, right? And actually use the data to encourage. But it's going to be a challenge because it's a monumental shift. It's a complete change on how, in agriculture, and I know nothing really about the agriculture, I'm a technical guy, but it's a monumental shift. And generally in the government, what we're bad at, and Esther picked up perfectly in her talk, in digital transformation, the government's notoriously bad. We almost try and boil the ocean. We almost try and take we've got this end goal solution, and it's actually quite complex and difficult, and we'll try and do it in one big transformation project. And rather than actually just chunking it up into small chunks and actually showing those deliverables and prototypes and giving what the end user kind of wants, the people out on the streets, etc., and breaking up into chunks makes a far better way. The government's still like to almost... I remember getting told, I'll go off on a slight tangent, and I was speaking to the CTO of Starling Bank, and this will probably be apt to everybody. He says, see, when you go through a transformation or you're building a new application, etc., you'll have a Gantt chart and you'll have like the idea all the way through to its build, etc., to it going live. And that Gantt chart ends. But from the operational side, there's nothing. There's no real kind of budget attributed to it. There's no Gantt chart on how you're going to manage and maintain. It's just kind of, well, that just works. And that's the old school of working at it. And the government are now coming to this problem where we've done that the whole time and we've left systems to maybe age and become less compliant, less secure. And the longer you leave it, the more difficult the challenge comes to actually modernise or transform these kind of applications, etc., because the gap is getting bigger and bigger. And what you have to do is do it constant and often, small bite-sized chunks, whether it's an application delivery or a complete big digital transformation. It's the smaller chunks. And the government are slowly starting to learn that boiling the ocean just doesn't work. Nobody wins. Sorry, that was a long answer to you.
No, it's an excellent answer. I'm going to put this to James and Charlie because I think it gets the award for most mischievous question of the day. Alex wants to know, have you ever tried using AI to search for players?
No.
Has it ever been discussed?
Not necessarily. I mean,
Not as such.
No. To the extent that we've used AI for stuff, it's normally for fixing code snippets and things that you know what it's like if you're locked in a room for a while, you bang your head against the wall and you're not getting anywhere, and actually you just chuck that in and goes, oh, lovely, that's solved a little problem for me. But no, it's not at that level of sophistication yet.
I think the interesting thing with sport is that a lot of people engage with sports. We sometimes have a beautiful view of what it might be. But for instance, in football, because all coding done globally for football, or the majority of football, rugby coding is all done manually. So it's done by sets of analysts in Croatia and South Africa, coding games manually, taking them between 6 to 10 hours to code games. Optical tracking, even with Sony and Hawkeye at the moment, isn't at the level it needs to be at for football. So with football, like AI optical tracking, they'll come into a corner and the machine won't be able to differentiate who's who whenever they come out, so they still need people pressing buttons. Yeah. They're beginning to change that in terms of players' gait and knowing their body and being able to track from that sense. But it's funny just the level to which we are with sport. And I think there will be a big change, like certainly from a performance side of things and certainly from the commercial side of things. Like we need to become more relevant, not to the Edinburgh lawyers, but to the younger fans. Exactly, to the younger fans who want to engage with sport in a different manner. Like one of the conversations we're having at the moment, which I think is absolutely mental across the world of sport, is that rugby's one thing, but football's another. And if you want to watch highlights of a football match, as a 60-year-old in Scotland or as a 10-year-old in Australia, you watch the same highlights. It seems utterly bizarre. With Spotify, you can get whatever music you want for whatever your tastes are. But with football, with the Man U match, you'll watch exactly the same highlights, which is a crazy, crazy concept.
in that one person might want to watch corners and another person might want to watch slide tackles. Yet we aren't, and we've got the ability to do it, right? Everything's coded in the right manner, but we haven't created an application for it. And we talk about hyper-personalization, we talk about commercializing the sports model, but we're going to get left behind by music and by entertainment and by other things that grab people's attention. So big challenge, but big opportunity.
Yeah. I'm, for obvious reasons, I'm not going to name names here. But I've worked with the BBC for over 40 years, and in that time I've known only three people to get fired. And one of them because he'd figured out a way of overplugging the Scottish football on a Saturday afternoon, and was selling it to a company in America. And there was a bunch of expats in Boston, I think it was, thoroughly enjoying what this was years and years, and we're talking a long time ago, watching it. And there was when it was discovered, there was a quiet discussion, and he moved on to spend more time with his family, as you do. Esther, that top question: what KPIs or metrics can be employed to demonstrate the value of showing rather than telling?
Great question. It depends on your program of work, but it should probably be your program of work KPIs and metrics, and it's all about how quickly you're able to implement that, how quickly you're able to learn, because that will increase your return on investment. So, for example, if you were to really think about, okay, what am I trying to achieve? I'm trying to get more fan engagement, for example. So actually, your measurement of success may be the number of fans that sign up for your thing. You may want to release a prototype or a minimal viable product on your current digital estate where people can sign up things, and you're looking at sign-ups. It may actually be the reduction in your build costs or the number of sprints that you're running to actually build something, because you've already mapped it out. You've got a clickable prototype, you've taken that to market, it's been tested, you've not invested in the build to find out if it's wrong or right from your customers. I mean, Ray was talking last night about when Tesco's released the app. They didn't work because they didn't do any testing at all, no user research, and it absolutely bombed. So that's really where the value is. Now, if you want to make sure that you can get value for your business and your end users, that's where user experience comes in. People think it's all about shiny, fluffy, fun stuff, and it is. There are unicorns, it's lovely. But what it actually is, it's about balancing the needs of your organization with the needs of your customers and enabling that to happen. So if you're failing on the organizational side in terms of your value, your operational costs are too high, you're not actually making any money back, and if your users can't complete their tasks, then that's a total fail. The win-win situation, or the win-win-win situation, is when the organization is happy, your customers are happy, and the environment is happy because you're not destroying it. So that would be my kind of things, would be looking at employee satisfaction, customer satisfaction, the velocity of your teams, and how quickly are you implementing the solutions that people want.
Thank you for that answer. I'm going to take one more question for Neill. How do you maintain innovation in the context of government procurement rules this is obviously Rayanne's opinion, that limits the reach to new innovative organisations?
Two things. You spelt Neill wrong, Rayanne. It's a sore point in me. I do get very sensitive on it. I'm only putting your legs. Ironically, I get asked this question, Mark, every time I kind of do talks, etc. Because it is, right? Government procurement is an absolute ball ache, and it's so difficult. It can limit, but if you understand the appropriate routes, then it becomes relatively easier. And I'll go back to how I used to have a fractured relationship with the head of procurement inside the Scottish Government. Generally what I would do is I would find a product that I wanted, I would find the route that I could do via direct award, and then I would go to them and went, I'm buying this with this budget via this route. And they hated it, and I understand why, right? But it now works for the greater good. And give you an example, and it goes back to Esther's prototype idea. Generally, when we have an idea and we're looking to buy something, software or hardware, we'll identify 3 products, and we will mention to those vendors and say, hey, this is what we want to do. We're looking at your product. These are the kind of requirements and the goals we want to see if you can achieve them. But you're going to do it for free. We're going to see if it meets. But we let each vendor know that they're all competing against each other. So then they're fully well aware. So we can actually prove, at no cost apart from our own time, we can actually prove that actually the product that we pick is actually fit for purpose, because we've actually tested it in real kind of life. And they're in a competitive, even though this is not in a procurement kind of piece, right? Again, this is the maverick grey areas and stuff. This is just proving out technology before we actually look to purchase something. Then when you ask them to say, well, how much is this roughly going to cost, kind of off the cuff kind of piece, then you find out and go, okay, well, that one fits all our objectives, but it's actually the most amount of money. And then what you do is you narrow it down and say, well, this fits best for price and best for, and then I find a route for procurement and buy it direct, etc. And there is thousands of procurement routes. I get asked this all the time. A lot of people get badly advised by their procurement team, and they'll end up, what I've seen over the years, and even in my infancy in the government, was you get forced to go down a competition route, and competition works well if you know exactly your requirements, but you can fudge competition tenders, because you can put a unique USP of a product that you know that none else have, so when the tender goes out to the vendors, they know exactly who you're looking for. So you can get around all that, but what used to happen is you go out to competition, again, I'm maybe talking down the civil service unfairly here, they wouldn't really know what they're after, they kind of know kind of high level, but and then what happens is, and they'll do the weighting wrong on price and kind of what your requirements are, and you'll end up procuring something that isn't fit for purpose, that actually you paid more than you actually wanted for, and nobody wins. The teams that meant to run with that, the end users, etc., and everybody loses. So I take a more of a proactive approach and be quite aggressive on the prototypes and the POV, the proof of values, play them off against each other and say, this one smashes it out of the park. And if it's slightly more expensive, I don't care, because it actually does what it needs to do. And it's just thinking that kind of creatively. And these are kind of, they're not breaking the rules. And I know you said, Mark, about you've only ever met 3 people in the BBCs that's maybe been sacked, and I always joke, and I hope there's no government employees in here, is it's almost impossible to get sacked in the government, but I'm always one day away from it, right?
Challenge accepted, Mr. Smith.
and it's living in those grey areas to go, I'm not breaking the rules, I'm just pushing or bending them to find out, for the greater good, right? It's not for my own, but it's for the bigger kind of piece. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question there, Ryan.
Yeah, it's a fascinating insight. Can I ask you, folks, to thank our 4 speakers one more time, please? Thank you very much. I'd just like to say a big thank you to all our speakers today. They've been excellent. I'd like to thank our conference partners, our exhibitors, and our sponsors. As Ray said, without their help, we can't do this, pure and simple. So I hope you took the time to talk to them. Those delegate badges around your neck, we will recycle those if you want to drop them off at the desk upstairs. There is a conference survey. As you know, there is always a conference survey. But this one actually matters. So give us your feedback, because they will act on it. It's a constant attempt by Digit to make these things better all the time. So it doesn't matter whether it's positive or negative. Please just let us know what you think. And if it's, if it can be addressed, it will be addressed. It'll be sent to you by email post-event. And obviously, you can get involved in this too. Now, think of the fun you can have. You could be sitting next to somebody that you think, they really annoyed me yesterday. So I'll suggest them as a speaker for the next conference. So there's always that possibility. Or you can put yourself forward if you fancy it too. We're always keen to extend our pool of speakers. If you'd like to get involved, please let us hear from it. Ray mentioned the next big event, which is on the 23rd of November at the EICC. That's Digit Expo. We were talking about it this morning, and they've got over 2,000 people registered for it already. It's a biggie. It's going to be huge this year. They've got speakers from Skyscanner, Microsoft, CERN, Starling, NatWest. It is very worthwhile coming along. It's absolutely mobbed, but it's a great chance to actually network. And you can find details on how to book on the Digit website. Drinks are going to be served upstairs. There's also the chance to actually see who won that Lego Porsche. I was saying to somebody earlier today, it was interesting from my perspective, reading an audience, that the women in the audience got much more excited about the Lego Porsche than the chance of going down on one knee and proposing to some bloke, which was completely irrelevant, couldn't care less, but give us the Porsche. It is still probably a bit damp out there. Just watch the roads on the way home, and thank you very much for your attention. Good afternoon.